Scandinavian sagas describe the Berserkers as warriors who fought in a trance-like state, seemingly immune to pain, capable of extraordinary violence, and impossible to stop until the battle was over. For centuries, historians debated whether this was literary exaggeration or something grounded in reality. The answer, it turns out, is both, and the part that is grounded in reality is considerably stranger than the legend. The word berserk comes from Old Norse and most likely means bear shirt, referring to the animal skins these warriors wore into battle. They appear in the sagas as elite fighters attached to the retinues of Norse kings, men who worked themselves into a fury before combat and became, by all accounts, genuinely terrifying to face. The sagas describe them foaming at the mouth, biting their shields, howling, and continuing to fight through wounds that would have stopped an ordinary man. Contemporary accounts from people who actually encountered them describe something similar enough that simple exaggeration seems insufficient as an explanation. The pharmacological question, meaning what exactly they were taking, has been debated for a long time. The most commonly cited candidate is Amanita muscaria, the fly agaric mushroom, a psychoactive fungus that grows across Scandinavia and that was used in shamanic traditions across northern Eurasia. The active compounds in fly agaric, primarily muscimol and ibotenic acid, produce effects that include altered perception, dissociation, increased physical sensation, and in higher doses, a kind of manic, agitated state that could plausibly map onto the Berserker accounts. Some researchers have pushed back on this theory, arguing that fly agaric more commonly produces sedation and disorientation, rather than the explosive aggression the sources describe. The debate has never been fully resolved. More recently, attention has shifted toward henbane, a plant in the nightshade family that contains scopolamine and hyoscyamine, compounds that, at the right dose, produce delirium, aggression, and a near-complete suppression of fear and pain perception. Archaeological evidence for henbane use in ritual and possibly martial contexts has been found at several Norse and pre-Norse sites in Scandinavia. A burial from the Viking Age discovered in Denmark contained a pouch near the body with henbane seeds, suggesting deliberate collection and use. The pharmacological profile of henbane fits the Berserker accounts considerably better than fly agaric does, producing the kind of frenzied, pain-resistant, fear-suppressed state the sagas describe, without the heavy sedation that often accompanies fly agaric intoxication. The genetic side of the Berserker question opened up when ancient DNA research began reaching into Viking Age burial sites across Scandinavia in significant numbers. What researchers found when they sequenced genomes from high-status Norse warrior burials and compared them to the broader Viking Age population was a set of patterns that raised questions the pharmacological evidence alone could not answer. Berserkers were apparently not just warriors who happened to take a particular substance before battle. The sagas suggest they were a hereditary class, that the capacity or the calling passed within families, and that certain lineages were known for producing them. This is consistent with what genetics has found in other warrior elite contexts across the ancient world, where specific groups maintained their status partly through genetic endogamy, meaning they married within a defined social circle and preserved certain heritable traits across generations. The genetic analysis of Viking Age Scandinavian populations has revealed that the people we broadly call Vikings were themselves more diverse than the popular image suggests, drawing ancestry from multiple waves of earlier migration into Scandinavia, as well as from contact with populations to the east and south. Within that broader diversity, the warrior elite burials cluster in ways that suggest they drew from specific ancestral lineages, rather than representing a cross-section of the general population. Whether those lineages carried specific genetic variants relevant to aggression, pain tolerance, or stress response is something the current data cannot fully answer, but the question is being actively researched. What the ancient DNA work has established more clearly is the question of continuity, meaning where the descendants of the Viking Age Scandinavians actually went, and how much of that ancestry survives in modern populations. The answer is that it survives substantially, particularly in Norway, where modern population genetics shows strong continuity with the Viking Age genomes from the same region. Studies comparing ancient Scandinavian DNA to modern Norwegian, Swedish, and Danish populations find that Norwegians in particular show the closest genetic match to the Viking Age individuals sequenced so far, with relatively less dilution from later migrations compared to some other parts of Scandinavia. This means that the genetic material carried by the warrior populations of the Viking Age, including whatever heritable factors may have contributed to the Berserker phenomenon, is represented in living Norwegian populations today at levels that are not trivial. The lines of descent are real and traceable. The specific genetic variants that might have made a 10th century warrior more susceptible to the effects of Henbane, or more capable of entering a dissociative combat state, or simply more physiologically suited to extreme violence under stress, are questions that population genetics is not yet equipped to answer with precision. But the ancestry that carried those variants, whatever they were, has not disappeared. There is a detail in the saga accounts that tends to get lost in the popular retelling of the Berserker story. The sources are consistent on the point that Berserkers were feared not just by enemies, but by their own side, that they were difficult to control, that the state they entered in battle did not always end cleanly when the fighting stopped, and that kings who kept them found them as much a liability as an asset in peacetime. Several sagas describe Berserkers being killed by the very rulers they served, not in battle, but afterward, because a man who cannot turn off that state is dangerous to everyone around him, regardless of allegiance. The pharmacological explanation accounts for part of this. Henbane and similar compounds do not produce a controllable, altered state. The person who takes enough of either to suppress pain and fear and produce combat mania is not going to reliably return to normal behavior on command when the battle ends. But the sagas also describe men who were this way without any substance, who simply had a capacity for controlled frenzy that others did not. And that description fits a genetic or neurological profile better than a purely pharmacological one. The honest answer is that the Berserker phenomenon was probably several things at once: a pharmacological practice, a hereditary social class, a set of psychological and physiological traits that made certain men genuinely more capable of the specific kind of violence that Viking Age warfare required, and a cultural institution that formalized and weaponized all of those factors together. The DNA of those men is in Norwegian soil and in Norwegian genomes. The Henbane seeds are in the archaeological record. The sagas are in libraries across Scandinavia. And the full picture of what the Berserkers actually were is still being assembled, piece by piece, from sources that were never designed to be read together.